All right, see the numbers have slowed a little bit, so we'll officially get started. Welcome, good morning everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 33rd annual The Hartford Virtual Ski Spectaculars Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Insight session as a part of the National Adaptive Academy. My name is Krista Rapocchio and I am the Senior Education Manager with Move United, formerly Disabled Sports USA and Adaptive Sports USA. We would like to thank the Hartford for their longstanding commitment and support, as well as the Department of Veteran Affairs, allowing us to bring you this virtual opportunity on our third day of Ski Spec. Before we get started, I'd like to go over some housekeeping items. All attendees will be on mute to minimize distractions, and your videos are also off screen. So because this is a webinar, you will only be able to see the videos of the speakers. Please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to submit questions rather than the chat. And if you've been joining us, we usually hold the questions till the end of the session, but Archie has kind of cued us that if you have a question that comes up around a particular slide or a particular topic, then we'll be happy to address that question as it's kind of coming up and put in the chat. In the Q&A. So please feel free to use that Q&A feature throughout the entire session. That's a little bit different to the flow we usually use. Closed captioning for this session has been enabled, and attendees are welcome to adjust font size as needed. You could use the button towards the bottom right-hand side of your screen to adjust the font and make any other adjustments as necessary. And please make sure to send your chat message to all panelists and attendees to introduce yourself to the whole group and to interact and engage with other attendees and Archie and myself and other Move United members as you see fit. So with all that being said, I am going to now turn it over to our presenter for today, Archie Aquino, and we'll get started.
Hi, good morning. Or good afternoon, or wherever you happen to be. I'm located just south of Denver, Colorado, and it's 25 degrees and the wind is a little bit breezy, but here we are. So we're going to talk today about diversity and whether or not it's really your business. So if you think about it, you get those people coming up to you saying, hey, diversity, it's none of your business. Or how diverse are we? It's none of your business. Well, let's answer some of those questions and see if those work for us. So just as a reminder, here's why we're here. We're going to discuss diversity, and we're going to discuss how diversity shows up in your program, and then how it benefits you as a program and even as individuals. So what is diversity? And like I said, or like Krista said earlier, if you've got any questions or you have any comments, please drop them in here and let's address them right away. We all have heard of different kinds of diversity, whether it's social diversity, meaning different rungs on the social ladder, physical diversity, and I know that we use terms such as diagnoses, and I'm very, very old school, so I'm not meaning to offend anybody if I were to say something like disability. Please know that some of my personal experience in working with those who have various levels and various types of diagnoses, it was common for us and me to use that term, disability, and I don't mean it in any way to offend anybody. Certainly there's a skills diversity. What is it that somebody brings in terms of what they can do, what they can't do, what do they know, what do they not know? All of those fit into what diversity is and how it can help us in what we're trying to do with our program. And of course, our major focus here is in adaptive skiing, or in skiing in general, and how we can use what diversity we do have in both social, physical, and skills diversity in our individual programs and how we teach and how we learn. So if you think about it in practical terms, diversity is anything that is different from you. So if it's not like you, if it doesn't behave like you, if it doesn't speak like you, it's something that is divergent from you. So there's somebody who has characteristics that diverge from yours. And that's how we think of this. A lot of us think too, many times, about a skills diversity or a physical diversity, whether they're an amputee, and I know I'll get some of the words wrong, social diversity, etc. And most people think there are a lot of sports or a lot of activities that an individual cannot take part in because of what they can or cannot do. And I'm here to challenge that entire thought, not just in terms of skiing, but in anything else you can imagine. So here you see an individual who is an amputee and playing some pretty damn good pickleball. And if you don't know what that is, get with me later and I'll be glad to talk to you about it. So, is disability a form of diversity? And I get that disability is a word that we're trying to move away from. And I think that we are using the term now, diagnoses. But I'll just keep it here because it gets us to focus on specific aspects of our programs that we're trying to include. So does any particular diagnosis make an individual different from you? Is it something that is a big question for your program? Does that individual differ from you in a way that truly matters? So our focus here, as we've said, is adaptive snow sports. And one of the things we need to do is talk about the experiences in skiing, snowboarding, sledding, and all of those other sports that happen on the snow. How does this affect them, and how does this affect you as their instructor or as their guide or as their friend who's out on the snow and trying to get them to participate in the particular activity in the best way they can, or to the fullest extent that they can do it. So that means that each one of our clients, guests, participants have a potential for doing things really well, not so well, or just well enough in order to get them happy or get them satisfied with the activity they are performing. So this potential, it's a great meme of having unrealized potential, but what does it really mean? What does it mean to us in terms of having that unrealized potential? Well, think about it as, how do we get, or what does that particular client have that we can take advantage of? Because many times we have absolutely no idea what diagnosis affects their particular makeup and what capabilities they have, or even what they don't understand that they have. Some of our clients don't know they can't do something because they've never tried it. And so here's an opportunity for us to show them and to guide them into the capabilities they do have. So is it a physical diagnosis? So are they wheelchair? Do they use crutches? Are they blind? Are they deaf? Do they have an absence of limbs? Is it a cognitive diagnosis? So do they have autism? Do they have, and I hate to call it a deficiency, but do they have some mental challenges that could make it difficult for them to comprehend what it is you're asking them to do, or to be able to communicate back to you that they understand or they don't understand? Are there psychological or physiological diagnoses? So can they control their muscles? Can they react to physical stimuli? Can they give you some stimulus back to indicate that they're understanding that they're able to do the things that you're asking them to do? And I know there are some differences and similarities between physical diagnoses and physiological diagnoses, but here I just want to talk about, and I guess those are pretty much the same, but how they react to you as opposed to what they bring to the table. For example, a wheelchair or an absence of a limb. But the physiological would be, well, how do they react to the fact that you're asking them to do something that they haven't in the past been able to do? And what about psychological diagnoses? How do they react psychologically to the things you're asking them to do? So such as PTSD, or even just the fear of being on something they can't control. I put somebody in a sled and we as skiers and ski instructors don't feel any issue with that, but somebody else may say, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen. Am I going to hit that car that's down there or run into other skiers or snowboarders or whatever might be on the hill? So we have to make sure that we, the staff, the instructors, are going to be guides for for helping our guests understand and how they can realize what their potential is. They don't know what it is yet, but let's give them that ride, and let's help make them or help them achieve those things that they didn't think they could achieve before. So one of the forms of diversity is a particular diagnosis. Now, when I was first putting this together, I had trouble with that word diagnosis because I'd always thought of this as disability or something that's different than me. Diversity takes a lot of different forms, and that could be a physical difference in us, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's 7 feet tall, and I'm only 5'8". Somebody whose language I can't speak, so that might be a diversity. Or somebody who's a really great skier and I'm not, or somebody who has one limb and I have two. So there are different kinds of diversity and diagnoses that we can talk about, but they are different from us, and we're all different from each other. So each one of the people that you encounter, whether they're a guest, whether they're another instructor, has something that they can bring to the table. But the thing that we need to do as instructors and as staff is to understand what that person's diagnosis is. How are they different from me, number one? How can I relate to them? What kind of shared experiences do we have that I can draw upon to help them understand what it is I'm asking them to do? So these abilities and capabilities are what becomes something that my guest or my participant can take advantage of, and I can take advantage of in being able to communicate. So we need to learn how to include our guest in and adapt our own programs so that we can incorporate how our guests react and what their experience level is, and how I can help them enjoy being out on the snow. In fact, just as much as I enjoy being on the snow. Let's see what we can do to do that, and how diversity might affect how we do that. How do I get my guest or instructor make it work? How can we do that? How can we make it work? So excuse me if I start getting kind of weird in some spots, because some of these particular areas affect me personally. There we go. So let's take advantage of the variety of skills that we bring, whether it's for the business or whether it's for the instruction, or whether it's for the interaction that we're trying to get with our students, participants, and guests. But let's take advantage of that, because there's a business aspect to this too, in terms of the people we bring to the table, the ability levels that they have, all of that diversity that are going to help our participants identify with whatever program you have and who you're trying to address. Help your guests and participants feel like you understand their particular issues. It's not enough to say that you understand and that you can feel for them and that you have empathy and sympathy for their particular situation. And I'll tell you, and most of you already know this, that a participant couldn't care less whether or not you feel empathetic or sympathetic, especially if you don't show it. And it isn't what we say to our participants and what our other individuals who we interact with. get from us. You know, it's not what we say, but it's what we show them. So it's how we behave. Here's an example here of two ski instructors taking and I'll have to call her disabled, a disabled skier up in a bi-ski. Most of you have all done this, or many of you have done this before, but you can see there's diversity even in this particular shot. So the one who's behind the bi-ski is obviously not a Caucasian. So there's some diversity there. The other instructor is a female, Caucasian, another part of the diversity. And the participant, the guest in that chair, is a quadriplegic. She's a C2 injury, and she must have a ventilator in order to survive. In fact, this is at Winter Park, and it's the first time that this program, the National Sports Center for the Disabled, has ever taken a bi-ski up to ski with the ventilator in this foot bucket. And if you look carefully there, you can see there's a ventilator there that runs on a battery. And the battery has about a 4-hour lifespan. But we wanted to make sure that we didn't use all 4 hours. So our lesson was only about 2 hours long. Oh yeah, that's me on behind the bi-ski. So I've heard a lot of different people talk about inclusion, adaptation, or incorporation of various levels of diversity into your own program. But what do those things mean? And what are they? How do they help me in my program, whether it's the business aspect or providing the program to my guest? How do we add those into my program? Do I need to change my program to accommodate various levels and various types of diversity? And how do I make diversity a part of how I do my business and how I teach, or how do I guide my guest in achieving their unrealized potential? What are the pros and cons of each one of these approaches? And it's entirely possible that all of your programs already do some level of these things. But let's see which ones will work the best for us and which one of those things don't work quite so well, and then how they work in your particular program. Because all of your programs are going to be different to the ones that I have experience with, and may want to do things differently than the ways that I may be talking about here today. And if that's the case, please interject and let's share some of that experience and knowledge with the others who are here. Don't keep it to yourself, because this is how we all learn. So there's inclusion with respect to how we build or bring diversity into our programs. Inclusion meaning we just take somebody who happens to be diverse from us, different from us, and we throw them into the program as if they're just thrown there and we don't even understand what diversity they bring to us. They're just another employee, another participant, another staff member, another volunteer who we just bring in, and then we throw them to the wolves, so to speak. There's adaptation also, where we start to understand what an individual brings in terms of their diversity. So and then we adapt our program in order to use their diversity in what we do. So let's say, for an example, we're trying to get money for our program, and I want it to address such individuals as veterans, military veterans who have had disabilities or have had issues with coming back into the real world, whatever that means. So I might want to bring somebody with that kind of diversity into my program. Do I adapt my program to that? Well, one way to do that would be to assure that I have somebody that has veteran experience, who is a veteran, who maybe served in various areas of the world that are similar to the areas of the world where my guests and my participants have been, and maybe even have had the same experiences as they have. What adaptations do I have to make? Well, it almost depends on what kind of diversity they're going to bring to my program. Do I have to allow them to, or do I have to provide for them a monoski? Do I have to provide for them standing outriggers? So that's an adaptation to them. But there's also pieces that sometimes we forget about, is how are the restroom situations with respect to that? What's it like to get out onto the mountain once COVID goes away and be able to eat up there? Let's say that they are in a biski, they can't use their legs for whatever reason. How do I get them into the restaurant so that we can enjoy that part of the mountain life that many of us have grown to become accustomed to? Does that mean I have to work with the ski area to provide wheelchairs up at the mountain area? Well, sure, that might be exactly how we adapt to it. The last part is incorporation, and what does that mean? If I can do the inclusion and the adaptation, and I don't even have to think about it in my program, and I make it part of my program as opposed to changing my program so that I can bring people in, then I'm incorporating what they bring, and in terms of the diversity of their skills and the diversity of their own life experiences into what we do. And we make it part of what we do. It makes it part of how I teach skiing. It makes it part of the business of getting funding. It makes it part of how I attract my participants to my particular program. I know that was a whole lot of stuff that went on there, and maybe you all already do this, but in a lot of cases, you do it, but you don't know you do it, and you do it, but you're not quite sure why you do it, and you do it, and you didn't know you were doing it. So those are the kind of levels of inclusion, of adaptation, and incorporation into your program. What about demographics? Do you have a target audience that you're looking for? And does your particular target audience represent your local community? For example, many ski areas are composed of Caucasian, mostly white, middle class individuals who are in the service sector of our society. Is that who we're bringing in? Well, maybe and maybe not, because am I looking for people from my local community? From here, that might mean going up to a ski area, and the local community would be those people who provide those services to that area. But my target area would be someplace who can actually afford to come up, perhaps. And for me, it's the local Denver area, Denver metropolitan area, which is the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains. And I think I looked that up earlier, and there's like 29% Black, 14% Asian or Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders, etc. And of course, the rest of the great majority of them being Caucasian, white, and relatively middle to upper class. How do I attract these people? And are they the ones who I'm trying to attract? Are they the diverse? Do I have a diverse enough staff that reflects my target audience, so that my target audience actually identifies with the program I'm trying to provide? And then will my participants and my funders and my instructors and my guides, are they gonna reflect my target audience? Because if I am a disabled veteran, I would sure like to have a disabled veteran who's my instructor or guide. If I'm an African American skier who perhaps has lost the ability to use one leg, I would sure like to have an African-American ski instructor to help me there as well. I might. Or if I don't have an African-American ski instructor with one leg missing or the inability to use that one leg, how about give me somebody who is a monoskier or somebody who doesn't have the use of one of their limbs, or maybe just provide me with an African-American ski instructor, whether or not they have any known disabilities or diagnoses that would make them similar to me in that sense. Let's just understand what our guests and what our participants are looking for in somebody to help them discover what their potentials are. Here's a photograph, that's me, and an individual who I met at the National Sports Center for the Disabled. National Sports, the National Disabled Veterans Winter Sports Clinic. I think this was at Crescent Butte. And you wouldn't think that there are any similarities between this particular guest and that particular ski instructor. And if you thought about it, you'd say, well, no, there isn't one, because here's an old white guy and a young brown person, and what do they have in common? One's got no hair and the other one's got a lot of hair, whatever. Oh, but they're both smiling. And one of the things that if you got to speak to them, which is what I got to do with this gentleman, is find out that we both came from the military. I'm a veteran, and so is this individual. And that's, by the way, why one of the reasons they asked me to come out is because I am a veteran. This individual lost the use of his legs, which means, and he did that while he was in the military. So that tells me that he's also a Purple Heart recipient. I found out he's also a Bronze Star recipient, of which I am also. We both served in combat. We both, excuse me. We both lost people. And we both learned how to deal with it. Sometimes I don't deal with it quite so well. But in any case, we found a connection. And that's what I hope that each one of you can do, is to bring that diversity, that and in this particular case, a lack of apparent diversity, and find out how you guys are actually similar to each other so that you can work together. And by the way, he and I are still friends today. So it's been 12 years since I've been in that particular program supporting them. Okay, so how do participants find out about your particular program? And I know diversity is one of the ways to do that. Who's your advertising team? Do they reflect the diversity and the demographics that you might have in your target audience? Most folks, and some of the groups that I've been involved with in the past, have an advertising team or a team that goes out to funders, to hopeful donors, to my participant groups, and they have absolutely no idea who they're meeting. They have absolutely no idea whether or not they reflect the group they're trying to target. And they have absolutely no idea whether or not they reflect the social, the physical, and other levels of diversity that that particular organization is looking to see. So try to be aware of what those things are, because they're going to affect the objectives each one of those organizations will have, what the participants and your guests would have, your hopeful guests, your donators or your donors, and the funding organizations. Understand what their objectives are. Are they a Black-oriented funding organization? Are they a Pacific Islander funded organization? Do they have individuals who tend to be 65 and older and just want a snow experience? So there are different kinds of objectives your organizations will have, and let's try to ensure that we understand what that diversity is and what we can bring to them and how we can truly show that we understand what it is they need from us, and that we can empathize, sympathize, and help them identify with the things that we're trying to provide, and that we really know where they're coming from. How do I select my team to do all of those things? Well, number one is understanding the demographic and diversity of my target audience. Find out what's truly important to them. And it's not just what objectives they stick on their little pamphlets and flyers, but being able to speak to them and understand, especially for that particular set of individuals that's sitting in front of you, whether they're donors, fundraisers, or potential guests, but speak to them individually and try to understand what their diverse levels are, what their diverse areas are, and what they're trying to achieve for their own organization or target audience. Okay, how do you keep your program alive? How do you make sure that it works? Well, we all know that somebody has to pay for all these snow sports experiences. Who pays for these things, and what demographics might they be? Are they actually able to afford these programs? Do I want to get donors to pay? All of the things that I'm talking about here, your business groups, your business segments of your organizations, all have an idea of what their particular funding requirements would be in how you do your program. How do you incorporate diversity into those aspects of your program? How do you do that? What kind of diversity do you need to have? And this is going to be dependent on the type of organization you are. Do you want mostly donors to pay for that? Are you looking for foundations to help you pay? Are you thinking that your guests and your participants are actually paying? Or are you hoping that your participants can get it for free? And also, how do you compensate your staff? Are your instructors, are your staff members, are your guides, are your leaders volunteers? How do you get them to volunteer? What is in it for them? And how do they get something out of your program? Well, a lot of it is knowledge requirement. You all have that need. And notice that there's a diversity in knowledge. We all come from different places. If you looked at me and you looked at that ski instructor, are you going to know that that particular individual is a combat veteran who happens to have a PhD in computer science? Or is a Pacific Islander who grew up understanding and living in lower income areas where that individual was surrounded by non-whites going to the same schools? So would you know that? You might not. And you might not know that that particular individual worked in a lot of different areas that might help them identify with the people you're bringing up there. So there's knowledge requirements. There's experience requirements too, and there's safety requirements that we all have to have in understanding what it is that not only do my participants need, but also what safety requirements does my instructor or staff or guide need at the same time. So you've all done it before, so I really don't want to beat that drum too hardly or too hard, but let's make sure that we understand the safety requirements and also the safety requirements that my particular guest might want to see. Oh yeah, I've got a tether, but does that mean that we actually know how to use it? And will my guest feel safe having me ski behind them? Maybe, maybe not, but they need to have the knowledge and the confidence in the diversity that I bring to that as a ski instructor, as a guide. And what kind of diversity requirements would we have? Well, we've been beating this one too. I want to make sure that my students, my guest, my participant, and I have made a connection. It means that I have to understand what makes them different from me, and also what makes me like them. How are we the same? So we have diversity, it's everywhere, but how do we make sure that we can make that diversity help us blend together? Okay, here are some things where we're alike. We come from the same parts of the world. We both speak English, Spanish, Tagalog, which is my native language. But there are different parts of what I know and what they know that we can bring together and share. And even I can learn from my guest, and my guest can learn from me. So let's make it a two-way street and not just one way in terms of knowledge. Do we come from the same place on the social ladder? One of the things that my guest may not want is an upper class or a high class, whatever that means, individual who comes in and brings with them the attitude of somebody who comes from upper class, and try to teach an individual or show an individual or guide an individual who doesn't come from that same social class. So let's be aware of those and be cognizant of what we're bringing to the table. Let's give our instructors and guests similar diagnoses, similar physical diversities. If I can, I'd love to have a monoskier go out with another monoskier. I would love to have somebody who has similar types of cognitive challenges go out with somebody who has the same kinds of cognitive challenges. I just watched an episode of The Good Doctor yesterday where they were talking about people who have autism, and then the doctor also has autism, and how they connect with each other and how much they learn from each other during that entire process. How about skills? What skills do we have that are diverse or skills that are similar to each other? We all have different kinds of skills. So let's get away from the fact or the thought that we could be ego-driven in how our skills are diverse, but that we use that diversity in our skills to help us provide a successful experience, and not just for our guest, but for each other. Many times I'll go out with another ski instructor who can tether the heck out of a monoski, but has trouble when they have to actually do a bucket ride. So, and maybe I'm really good at that. And so maybe those are the areas where we share our skills, and we, as a diversity for that particular individual who we're helping down the mountain. Excuse me. And how do I help my instructors become guides? Not from the blind skier aspect, but from discovering my particular guests, participants' potential, and helping them discover what that is. So again, include, adapt, incorporate. How do those things work for you? Inclusion just takes any particular diversity, whatever it is, find an opening, make it fit, and take these individuals, no matter how wide their diversities are, and throw them into the program. And it almost becomes their own responsibility of finding a place for them to fit and finding how they can contribute to your program. Adaptive. So how do I adapt those individuals into my program? I have to make changes. I have to allow various diverse characteristics of the individuals to perform special tasks that are necessary for my success. But what I'm trying to do is adapt my organization or have them adapt and make changes to what they do and what the organization does to take advantage of their characteristics. We're forcing the organization or the individual to change and adapt. An incorporation, which is, I hope, where we get to, makes diversity an integral part of how we do what we do. So we recognize the value of each individual independent of what their diversity is, but let's also recognize that each individual brings with them a diversity which can be beneficial to what it is we do and to not just the success for our students and for our guests, but success for our overall program, whether it's to go out and fund, whether it's to go out and find donors, whether it's to go out and find individuals who would benefit from what we provide. So incorporation, to me, says, here's how we make diversity a part of our particular program. Notice that you'll have to go through those other steps in order to get there. So you have to learn how to include people to begin with, how to adapt your business, and how your individuals have to adapt themselves to how you do business, and then you incorporate all of those things that you learned in including an adaptation to making your business, not even think of it in terms of diversity, but thinking of diversity as part of who you are and what you do. So which model works for you? I contend that they all do at some degree. Which model would you choose? And there are reasons for including any of these or using any of these. And there are even some reasons why you won't want to have any of them. It can be expensive to incorporate diversity into your program. It can be next to impossible because you can't get the types of diversity that you want to have. So keep all of that in mind as you're trying to figure out what it is that works best for your program. Okay, so what do we take away from all of this? Diagnosis is part of diversity. So what I'm able to do, what I'm not able to do, what I can understand, what I cannot understand, where I come from, where I don't come from, are all part of diversity. And they all contribute to my program. They all contribute to how I deal with the people who bring money to me, and they all contribute to how my client and how my guest benefits from the programs that I provide. Our diversity also allows me to identify with my particular client, and I use client here to mean all of those people I just discussed, whether they're funders, whether they're donors, or whether they're participants/guests. So it helps me personify with them and lets them understand, or lets them actually realize that I understand what they want, what they need, and what they can get from me as a program. Because we share experiences, we share the diagnoses or disabilities or abilities and capabilities. We have similar diversities, whether it's the color of our skin, the color of our hair, whether or not it's long, it's short, curly or not, whether I speak the same language as they do, whether I have the same kind of characteristics, capabilities, etc., as they do. And do I understand? And can I identify with them? And can they identify with me? All of this says that a diversity can absolutely improve my guest's experience. Why? Because that my guest knows or can actually see that we identify with each other, that we are the same as each other. There's that visibility that can attract a guest and donor, our clients, to our own programs, and it gives me, my program, more options to provide services for those people who need them. Don't think of diversity as just one particular aspect, and don't think of diversity as those things that make us different. But think of diversity as how the fact that we have diversity, that we have to work harder at trying to find those things that make us similar, that make us human, that makes us parts of the same society. So use your diversity and similarities in that aspect to get yourself to be able to identify with your clients, and then use discussion to find out where you are alike in other ways. So what are your next steps? What are you going to do next? Oh, there's me again at the Winter Sports Clinic, another veteran. This particular individual lost the use of their lower limbs as well. He was a lot younger than me. He did not serve in combat. Being able to talk about that, a lot of it was because he's Air Force just like I was. Okay. Oh, my internet says it's unstable. Assess your program's guest base. So what does that mean? Let's understand where our people are coming from. Understand where our donors are coming from. Understand where our funders are coming from and who our target guest audience is. Let's assess what our program's ability is to meet and match that diversity that we see. Do we have training and awareness of what those diversity components are? And how do we reach past that diversity into finding things where we are alike? Let's identify what our program funding sources are. And we spoke about that a little bit earlier, so they become clients with us. What is their program philosophy as well as our own? We may find diversity there, but we should also find commonality as well. So what's their philosophy? What's my program philosophy? And let's get them so that they coincide with each other. Let's identify and reach out to our potential guests. Who are we looking for, and how do our diverse natures, how do our diverse characteristics match up, and then how can we learn how to identify with each other to make our guest experience even better? So as Picard would say, make it so. Just go out and do it. Let's go make that part of what we try to do, what we try to incorporate into our programs. Let's figure out what worked, what didn't work, and then take those lessons and incorporate it into our own programs. Let's minimize what deficiencies we found and what didn't work so that we can make what does work even better, right? So we maximize our particular successes. So diversity, just like we started with, we talked about what it is and what it isn't. We talked about the fact that diversity gives us some kind of separation, and that our programs need to learn how to get past the diversity, incorporate the diversity, take use of the fact that we are diverse, and then find the commonality that helps us get to the same place, or helps us as instructors or guides, help our participants, guests, and clients arrive at the same goals. So make it your business. Diversity isn't just one aspect of your business, but it should be your business and how your business becomes successful. Be the guide for all of your guests in finding that commonality and then finding the successes that you can all have, and help your guests realize their own particular potential. And oh, by the way, that works for your organization and your program as well. Are there any questions that any of you might have?
Archie, good timing, because we've just had 2 questions come in. And first, I'd like to thank you so much for the information you provided during the session and for sharing your own truth and your own authentic stories. We had 2 questions come in, and I'd just like to say that when you're in the DEI space, vulnerability is a really important factor, right? In order to get real and have conversations and ask questions that might be difficult, or conversations. So I want to thank the 2 people that have entered these questions and been vulnerable in what they're about to ask. So the first question that we have here is from an anonymous attendee. And there's a little bit of a description in the question towards the end here. And it's this person says, my mountain is on sacred land to the indigenous tribes in the area. After years of court battles that ended in the mountain being able to use artificial snow. This has had a negative effect on the spiritual areas held dear by those tribes. On the other end, without the artificial snow, we would not be able to serve as wide of a range of individuals with disabilities, including some of those indigenous members, mostly children. Is this just an excuse I and my program are making, or, in your opinion, would it be possible or a good idea to invite members of those tribes to be a part of our board or staff to show us the importance of their land and create a working partnership where we are serving our diverse community while respecting the sacred areas we are on? Any thoughts on this would be greatly appreciated.
Sure. I think that one of the things that I talked about here, and I think that many people already, and you probably already understand, is that we need to appreciate who our customers are and what is important to them. So not just what's important to us and who we're trying to attract, but what makes a particular organization or a particular community or a particular family want to be a part of what we try to provide. And if I don't understand what they want, what they need, and how I can reflect that, then I'm not doing them a service, and I'm not providing them a program that works for them. So in this particular case, I need to understand, I meaning the program, needs to understand what this land means to these individuals. Because I may not have that same idea. I may not have that same appreciation. I may not have that background that allows me to do that. And if I don't, then I need to bring somebody in who does, which means I invite you, me personally, I would invite you to bring people from the tribes and from the indigenous individuals who are there, who do understand those things, into your staff, make them part of your board, and then teach them as you are learning from them what it is you're trying to provide. And then find common ground where you can do that and still provide for them respect for their lands and for their ways. So that's where that diversity comes in. I speak about diversity, but I also speak about trying to find common ground. And I think that's a way to do it. I think that's a great way. Bring them in on your staff, make them a part of that. And then don't forget to respect what it is they're bringing to you, and try to understand what they're bringing to you as they try to understand what you're trying to provide for them.
Thank you. We have one more question here, and there are a few more minutes left, so if you have any additional questions, please feel free to plug them into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. But we have a question from Amber, and Amber asks, mentions and then asks, one thing I haven't heard mentioned in diversity is gender and gender identity. I'm an athlete, but I'm also trans. I really feel as though creating diversity by gender and gender identity is important. I haven't yet to find an instructor that I can identify with in my identity. What are some ways that we could, as a community, create more diversity in gender and gendered identity?
Great question, because I'm also trans, so I stand on the LGBTQ+ spectrum, and really until about 5 years after I left the NSCD, the National Sports Center for the Disabled, I kept my whole life prior to that, the 20 years that I was working there, as a male. And now I identify as female, and when I show up on the mountain, that's exactly what my students might encounter. Those of you who spend a lot of time in ski suits and ski outfits know that in a lot of cases, nobody knows who and what you are. When you're dressed that way and you've got a helmet on, you got a mask on, they can't even tell if I'm brown. So a lot of this, I think, comes from two places. Number one, or three places. Number one, how do you feel comfortable in your own skin? Are you authentic to yourself? And for me, as being trans, that's probably one of the most important things. Two, how does your program allow you to express your authentic personality and authentic self? How do they react to you? And I'll tell you that my program, the NSCD, reacted extremely well. Some of them just dropped their jaws, and if you're trans, you get that, you understand that they do that, and we realize that that happens, so we have to accept that as part of our daily lives. And then the next is, do they actually invite individuals, students, clients, participants who are trans? And you know, like I do, being trans, is that we don't always let that out. We don't, even as a participant or a student, we don't let that out. So it's very difficult in many times to let other people know, as a student who is still in the closet or partially there, or at least have feet or arms in the closet, that it's extremely difficult to get out of that closet. And one of the ways I think we can do this, and I do this too when I was teaching, is take that jacket off, take the helmet off, let them see who you are. Because I'll tell you what, many trans people will be able to spot another trans person. It's not always true of somebody who's cisgender, but certainly a transgender person, almost 90% of the time, and I can't justify that number or be able to tell you that, but I know that I could probably spot another trans on the street if I was just walking down the street. But we can make a trans guest feel comfortable. Just the fact that we're there and we're not afraid to put ourselves out there for them and let them see us as who we are. So that's what I would recommend for you, Amber, or for anybody else who is in that same boat, is number one, embrace your authentic self. And then two, don't be afraid to show that to other people, because I bet you find that you're going to allow other people to come out as well. I hope that answers your question, Amber. But that is, as you probably already figured out, that is from the same aspect or part of society that I come from.
Thank you for that, Archie, and thank you for that question, Amber. And it's definitely gotten people engaged. We had a comment come into the Q&A from Henry that just states that last question reminds me of the danger of making assumptions. We all make assumptions that aren't always helpful. So, you know, I think that has, you know, been reached by many people that are in our attendance today and are realizing that conversations and identity and inclusion are extremely important. So I don't want to stop this, but our time has come to an end today. Thank you so much, Archie, for the information, for everything you provided with us in the last hour. I know we had some really great takeaways about, you know, disability or diagnoses are a part of diversity, and diversity, as you stated, can greatly improve your guest experiences and make diversity your business. I thought that was a really easy and great takeaway from the session as well. So I'd just like to thank you again for being here with us. And for all of our attendees, thank you as well for joining us for this, you know, early morning session, depending on where you are, the start of your afternoon. We really value your feedback, and especially in the DEI space, as we hope to have, you know, more conversations and keep this a commitment as moving forward. You know, your feedback around this is extremely valuable. So Jesse just put a link to our survey in the chat. And if you could please take a few seconds to complete that session survey, it'll appear in your browser as well when you close out. It'd be extremely helpful to us. You can also stay engaged and share your favorite ski spec memory or your thoughts on this session or the event throughout the remainder of the day on social media using the hashtag ski spec. And Archie, any final statements or words you'd like to say?
Just, hey, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed being here. This was, like I said, this is my first virtual performance, if you will. I would like everybody just to take away that each one of you has potential for doing whatever it is you're trying to do. Much of it has already been realized. Some of it has been unrealized. And our jobs and yours is to go help other people realize their own personal potential.
Yes, and Archie, just before we close out here, we had a request to know if it would be okay if you could share your email.
Sure, it is Archie, A-R-C-H-I-E, at arasystems.com.
And we'll send that out in the follow-up as well for anybody that might have missed it. But thank you, Archie. Thank you to our attendees, and we hope to see you at another session before the close of the day today. Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Archie.